My daughter-in-law walked into my living room, sat on my sofa like she owned the place, and accused me of stealing her money. But when I calmly asked her only question, she turned pale, started shaking, and almost fainted. And trust me, what happened next? Nobody in this house was ready for it. Have you ever been so shocked that your brain needed a full 10 seconds just to reboot? Like one of those old computers that groans and flickers before the screen finally comes alive. Because that's exactly what happened to me the day my daughter-in-law Chelsea showed up in my living room, without so much as a text, a knock, or even a polite cough, and sat right on my sofa like she was posing for a magazine spread titled, "How to be Entitled in 3 Easy Steps." I mean, she crossed her legs like she paid the mortgage, leaned back like she owned stock in my recliner, and then, in front of my entire family, started insulting me so loudly you'd think she was auditioning for one of those dramatic courtroom shows where people scream, cry, and confess things they didn't even do. And the worst part, it wasn't even supposed to be a dramatic day. It was supposed to be a simple, peaceful Sunday morning. I had muffins in the oven, blueberry ones, the kind my grandkids love so much they always sneak an extra when they think I'm not looking. My son Mark had texted that he was bringing the kids over, and I was sitting in my favorite armchair, enjoying the kind of quiet moment that feels like a gift at this age. My crossword puzzle was halfway done. I even had a cup of chamomile tea perfectly steeped. Life was good. And then the front door swung open. No doorbell, nothing, just the sound of chaos entering my peaceful home. She walked in uninvited, unannounced, and absolutely unapologetic, wearing that expression she gets when she's about to start a sentence with, "No offense," which, as we all know, always means maximum offense incoming. Before the door even fully closed, she loudly demanded, "Where is it?" I blinked, confused, still holding my crossword pencil. "Where is what, honey?" I asked, though I already knew the tone she was using had nothing to do with honey. That tone was vinegar. Aged, spiked and shaken. "My money," she said, stepping further into the room and pointing at me like she was selecting someone in a police lineup. "The money why you stole from me." Now, let me tell you, my entire family froze like someone had hit the pause button on life. My son's jaw dropped mid-sentence. My granddaughter's juice box stopped mid-squeeze, leaving a grape-scented bubble about to burst. Even my dog, Lucky, looked at her like, "Girl, what?" No one moved, not even me. She kept going, pointing dramatically, her voice getting louder with each accusation. "You think I don't know? You think I'm stupid?" And I swear on my grandmother's rolling pin, for a split second, I wondered if I was on hidden camera. I even glanced around the room, half expecting someone to pop out of a closet yelling, "You've been pranked." But no, this was real, very real, and she was only warming up. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't even stand up. I just took a slow, steady breath. The kind I learned to take after 62 years of family drama, marriage drama, and the occasional, "my casserole didn't turn out right" drama. Because when someone storms into your home accusing you of theft, in front of your son, your grandkids, and even your potted fern that has already seen too much, something deeper is going on. Something that has nothing to do with you. So I looked right at her and said in the calmest voice I could manage, "Chelsea, why don't you tell us exactly what you think I stole?" And let me tell you, that one sentence hit her like a speed bump she wasn't expecting. Her face didn't fall completely, but a tiny crack showed in that wall of confidence she came armed with. She wasn't ready for calm. She came expecting screaming. She came expecting excuses. She came prepared for chaos, for tears, for me to get flustered or defensive, or maybe even faint dramatically like they do in the movies. But instead she got serenity. And oh, she hated that. The kind of hate you can feel in the air, like static before a storm. She shifted uncomfortably but tried to keep her posture arrogant, like she was the queen and we were her confused court. "Don't play innocent," she snapped. "You were here last week. You were alone in the house. You snoop through things. Everyone knows it, snooping. Me. The boldest thing I do at night is sneak to the pantry to grab an extra cookie and hope Lucky doesn't follow me and give away my location." Still, she stood there, chin high, eyebrows raised, waiting for me to crumble. When I didn't, her frustration grew. My son Mark finally spoke, voice slow and cautious. "Chelsea, what exactly is missing?" She turned to him and crossed her arms dramatically. $3,000 gone. From my card, and the bank said it was transferred from inside this house. A gasp rippled across the room, not from me but from everyone else. 3,000. My granddaughter whispered, her eyes huge, probably wondering how many toys that could buy. But I stayed calm. Calm like a woman who knew something wasn't adding up. Calm like a woman who'd seen plenty of lies unravel in front of her over the years. Calm like a woman who, unknown to Chelsea, already sensed this wasn't about money at all. I tilted my head slightly, studying her. "And you think I took it?" She didn't even hesitate. "Yes. You had motive. You always complain about bills and medicine and—" "Chelsea," I said slowly, "I don't have access to your card." She waved her hand dismissively, like facts were inconvenient suggestions. "You were in our home. You could have seen something, taken something." Her voice grew louder, sharper, more desperate. But the louder she got, the more quiet the room felt. Even the muffins in the oven seemed to stop rising, and that's when I knew something was wrong. Not with the money. Not with her. Something deeper. Something she didn't want exposed, and so, instead of rising to her level, instead of shouting back, I tightened my grip on my pencil, took one more measured breath, and asked the question that would change everything. "Chelsea, are you absolutely sure you want to continue this conversation in front of everyone?" And the look she gave me in that moment, pure panic, quick, subtle, but unmistakable. A crack, a slip, a signal. She came looking for a fight, but she wasn't ready for the truth that was about to surface. And oh, she had no idea what was coming next. Chelsea pulled out her phone with the dramatic flair of someone revealing classified information, waving it in everyone's faces like she was about to expose a national scandal rather than embarrass herself in my living room. And she held it so close to my son Mark's nose he had to lean back to avoid getting smacked by the glittery phone case she bought last month. "You transferred $3,000 out of our joint account," she announced, her voice trembling with fake outrage but loud enough to rattle the picture frames on the wall. "From my card. At 2 a.m. last Tuesday." And just like that, a hush fell over the room. One so deep even the ticking of the wall clock seemed to pause, as if it didn't want to miss what came next. Now, here's the thing. First, I don't have access to her card. Second, at 2 a.m. Tuesday I was snoring so fiercely my poor dog Lucky abandoned me for the guest bedroom. And third, if I had ever needed money that desperately at 2 a.m., you better believe I would have cooked another batch of muffins and sold them on the street before even considering touching her account. But did any of that matter to Chelsea? Absolutely not. She had decided. No. Declared that I was the villain in her little late-night financial drama, and she wasn't about to let facts or logic interrupt her performance. "You were the only one home that night," she snapped, flipping her hair with the kind of theatrical confidence only a guilty person or a reality TV star could pull off. "You were probably snooping around like you always do." And then she paused dramatically, as if waiting for the shock value to sink in. "Me snooping. The most dangerous thing I do at night is sneak into the kitchen for leftover apple pie, hoping the floorboards don't betray me with a creak and notify the entire house of my sugar cravings." But according to her, apparently I was now some kind of midnight espionage specialist. Mark looked confused, torn between wanting to defend his wife and wanting to trust his mother, his face twisting into that classic, "Oh no, here we go again," expression I remember from when he was 8 and accidentally broke his sister's ceramic cat. My grandkids were wide-eyed, clutching their juice boxes like emotional support beverages. And me? Well, I suddenly felt that heavy, familiar punch older women know all too well, the sting that comes when someone younger assumes we're weak, naive, outdated, or the easiest targets in the room. But behind that ache was something else. Something sharper. Something rising from a place in me I thought had softened with age. Because little did Chelsea know, I wasn't always the gentle grandmother who bakes muffins and solves crossword puzzles. Before that, I spent 32 years working in an office where half the job was catching errors people tried desperately to hide. Numbers that didn't add up, stories that didn't align, details that betrayed bigger secrets. I had developed an instinct for the truth, the kind that tingles just behind your ribs when something doesn't smell right. And something about her accusation didn't just smell wrong. It stank like weak, old leftovers. So I adjusted my glasses, leaned forward just enough to make her uncomfortable, and asked, "Chelsea, sweetie, are you sure the transfer wasn't made from your phone?" Her head snapped in my direction like I had slapped her with a dictionary. She rolled her eyes, big, exaggerated, teenager-level sarcasm. "Of course I'm sure," she barked. But there was a twitch in her jaw, a flicker in her eyes. Interesting. Very interesting. If I had been watching her across an interrogation table, I would have circled her reaction with a red pen. Before any of us could process what was happening, she lifted her phone again like it was an ironclad weapon and added with extra venom, "And if you don't admit it, I swear I'll call the bank and the police. And there it was, the threat, the nuclear option. She dropped it like a bomb in the middle of my living room. The room went silent, the kind of silence that feels thick, heavy, almost sticky. My daughter-in-law was accusing me, the woman who helped her plan her wedding, who babysat her kids, who stayed late to help clean after birthday parties, of criminal theft. My first instinct was pain, deep embarrassment. Then fear, not because I was guilty, but because being publicly accused of something you didn't do hits the soul differently, especially when you're older and people sometimes underestimate your voice. Anger stirred next, hot and quick, but I swallowed it back, refusing to give her the reaction she clearly came looking for. Instead, I kept my voice steady, almost dangerously calm, and said, "Well then, Chelsea, I have just one question." She stiffened. Her shoulders rose. She clutched her phone tighter, like she knew on some instinctive level that she had walked into the deep end without floaties. My son leaned forward slowly, my grandkids held their breath, and even Lucky padded back into the room, sensing the shift. "One question," she repeated, her voice suddenly thinner, wobbling at the edges. "Yes, one question. One I had been holding in the back of my mind from the moment she stormed in. One I knew she would never expect, and one that, when spoken aloud, would make her turn pale as a ghost, nearly faint, and reveal more than she ever intended to. Because the truth was already unraveling, she just didn't know it yet. Now, I didn't raise my voice, slam a hand on the table, or march across the room the way dramatic TV grandmas do when they've had enough. I didn't even lift a finger. But I did tilt my head ever so slightly, the way a mother does when she already knows the truth, but wants to give you one last chance to hang yourself with your own words, and in the sweetest voice I could muster, I asked, "Chelsea, if I transferred money from your account at 2 a.m., then why was your phone used for a rideshare trip to Brookline at exactly the same time?" And let me tell you, Boom doesn't even begin to cover it. Her face went from warm rose gold foundation to the exact color of unpainted drywall in under 3 seconds, and the transformation was so fast even my grandson whispered, "Whoa," under his breath. Chelsea froze, blinking like someone had unplugged her brain mid-thought. How do you know about that?" she stuttered, her voice suddenly small, like a child who just got caught stealing cookies before dinner. I shrugged casually, pretending like the whole thing was barely worth mentioning. "Oh," I said. The rideshare receipt popped up on the family printer, and the moment the words left my mouth, you could feel the whole room inhale. "It seems your phone is synced to our Wi-Fi's smart devices," I continued. "You must have forgotten." The kids' mouths dropped so far open they could have caught flies. Mark's eyebrows shot up into a position I hadn't seen since the day he found out Santa wasn't real. Even Lucky, my dog, walked over slowly and sat down like he wanted front row seats to the unfolding drama. I kept going, still calm, still collected, like this was just Sunday tea and not a bomb detonating in my living room. "And the pickup location wasn't this house," I added lightly, watching the color drain from her face even more. "It was the apartment complex on Lincoln Avenue, the one your friend lives in." And I swear, you could practically hear the air crackle. I wasn't accusing her of cheating. Oh no, not my style. But I was shining a giant stadium-sized spotlight on something she definitely didn't want discussed in front of her husband and children. Her lips trembled, her hands shook. The phone she'd been waving around like a weapon now dangled weakly from her fingertips. That's not I wasn't, you can't." She tried, her voice collapsing on itself like a folding chair under too much weight. Mark stepped forward, and the anger, confusion, and heartbreak mixing on his face could have broken glass. "Chelsea," he said, voice low but loaded, "why were you at Lincoln Avenue? You told me you were at your sister's." And that was it. That was the moment everything inside her seemed to crumble. Her throat tightened so visibly I could see the struggle from 10 feet away. She looked trapped, cornered by her own lie, by her own arrogance, by the simple fact that she hadn't expected me, the sweet older woman who bakes muffins, to outsmart her. Suddenly the woman who had stormed in my house like a rampaging tornado, ready to accuse me of theft, fraud, and probably bad fashion choices if given enough time, couldn't even form a full sentence. I leaned back, folded my hands neatly in my lap, and said gently, "So before you accuse me of stealing, maybe you should explain why your phone was somewhere it shouldn't be." Her knees visibly wobbled. Her breath turned shallow. She grabbed the arm of the sofa like she needed something solid to keep her from collapsing right there onto the rug. The whole room stayed frozen, silent, waiting for her to say something. Anything. But all we got was a choked inhalation that sounded like someone trying not to cry. And then, just like that, she sank onto the cushion, trembling, her head hanging low, her hands shaking so hard her phone clattered to the floor. When she finally looked at me, her eyes were watery, terrified, guilty, and strangest of all, soft. She swallowed hard, her voice cracking as she whispered, I. And for the first time in years of passive-aggressive comments, years of rolls at my cooking, years of whispering to Mark that I was too involved. She called me Mom. Isn't it funny how truth has a way of rearranging people's manners? How suddenly the woman who barged in with accusations had turned into someone fragile, timid, and afraid of the very thing she tried to weaponize. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I didn't rub it in, even though the petty part of me wanted to frame this moment and hang it in my hallway. Instead, I simply sat there, watching her world tilt, watching accusations turn into excuses, and watching guilt unravel every bit of confidence she'd strutted in with. Because I knew we were only at the beginning. There was more beneath this. More she hadn't said. More she'd hidden. And the fear in her eyes told me she knew I knew. The room remained thick with tension, the kind that makes your heart beat a little too hard, and your palms sweat even though you're just watching. Mark stared at his wife, waiting, demanding answers without speaking. The children clung to each other, sensing their world had shifted, even if they didn't understand how. And me? I sat quietly, gathering myself, preparing for what would come next. Because if Chelsea wanted to lie, accuse, embarrass, and manipulate, she'd picked the wrong grandmother. The truth was out now, and once truth steps into the light, there's no putting it back in the shadows. Little did she know this unraveling, this crack in her story, was only the beginning of the storm. When the last echo of arguments faded and the room finally felt still enough to breathe again, Chelsea sat there on my sofa. Yes, the same sofa she strutted in and claimed like she owned it, looking far smaller than the woman who had walked into my house hurling accusations like confetti at a parade. Her mascara was smudged, her hands trembled, and for the first time since I'd known her, she didn't have a single sarcastic remark sitting on the tip of her tongue. Instead, she took a shaky breath and admitted the truth. Not the softened version, not the half-truth she usually tried to slide past us, but the real, raw, unpleasant truth. She hadn't lost the money. She hadn't been hacked, no one stole anything from her. She had overspent, wildly, irresponsibly, carelessly, and she was terrified to tell Mark. The missing 3,000, she whispered it out like a confession to a priest. Gone. Brunches, shopping sprees, a weekend hotel stay she said was with her sister but wasn't, and a few charges she couldn't even remember. All of it wrapped in a panic-induced lie that spiraled so far out of her control, she thought the easiest escape was to pin it all on me. Made an old woman she assumed was too soft, too quiet, too unimportant to fight back. The late-night rideshare to Brookline. She used it to hide the transactions by spreading them out, thinking it would look less suspicious than blowing through a stack of cash all in one place. It was a sloppy plan, but in her mind it was genius. What she didn't account for was our Wi-Fi printer connecting to her phone and dutifully printing out her secrets like a tattletale child with sticky hands. And when she finally finished her confession, the dam holding her together broke. She sobbed loud, messy, red-faced sobs. Not the dramatic feel sorry for me kind. These were the honest, panicked tears of a woman caught in the exact trap she set for someone else. "I'm so sorry," she choked out. "I didn't know what else to do. I thought if I blamed you, Mark wouldn't look too closely. I panicked, I messed up, and I thought if I made it about you, he'd focus on protecting me instead of questioning me." I felt the whole house tilt for a moment. The anger I'd been holding onto softened, just a little, because I could see it plainly. She was scared. Not scared of being caught. Scared of being judged. Scared of disappointing the people she loved. Scared of the consequences. And yes, she chose the ugliest, most hurtful way to deal with that fear, but fear makes fools of all of us sometimes. Still, I wasn't about to act like everything was fine. I'm older, yes, but I am not a doormat. I am not decoration. I am not someone's scapegoat. I am still a woman with a sharp mind, a long memory, and every receipt needed to defend myself. So I took a long breath, walked toward her, and placed my hand gently, carefully, on her shoulder. "Chelsea," I said, and my voice surprised even me at how calm it sounded. "When you lie to protect yourself, you hurt the very people who want to love you." And that was the truth. The painful kind. The kind that sits in your chest like a stone. She cried harder, shoulders shaking, breath hitching, face crumpled. Mark apologized for her, though I knew he felt ashamed too. Not just of her actions, but that he hadn't noticed the signs sooner. The kids hugged me like I'd just survived a tornado, which, in a way, I had, and for a long, slow moment, the air finally felt breathable again. But after everyone left, after the apologies settled into silence, after I put the kettle on out of habit more than desire, I sat down in my quiet living room and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: clarity. I realized something important, not just for me, but maybe for every woman listening who's ever been dismissed or underestimated, or treated like the weakest person in the room, simply because she's gotten older. I realized that I've spent too many years letting people assume my kindness meant fragility. Letting people mistake my silence for ignorance. Letting people think that because I don't shout, I can't see what's right in front of me. But I saw everything. I always do. And that night I made a decision, one I didn't expect to make, but it was long overdue. No more letting anyone, family or not, treat me like I'm fading into the background. No more letting people use my age as an excuse to disrespect me. No more bending so far to keep peace that I lose myself in the process. I may be aging, but I am not done. I am not weak. I am not invisible. I still have my dignity, my intelligence, my instincts, and yes, my receipts. If there's one thing I want every woman watching this to remember, it's this: never underestimate the power of staying calm. In the middle of chaos, in the heat of accusation, in the very moment someone hopes you'll crumble, your calm is your strength. Your silence is your shield. Your truth is your loudest weapon. And sometimes you don't have to scream to shake the room. Sometimes one well-placed question does the job. Thank you for listening to my story, and if you want more real stories just like this, stories about family, dignity, strength, and the quiet power we hold as women, don't forget to subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next.